Assalamualaikum and greeting to everyone. Welcome to the Fakulti Pertanian Speaker Corner. I am Muhammad Bin Khairul Hafiz, will be your moderator today. Before that, I would like to introduce our panel today, which is Muhammad Danial Bin Azizul, come from the Bachelor of Science Aquaculture from second year student. Then, today he will sharing the topic about the save our coral. So, without wasting our time, welcome, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Fidos, for inviting me to give a talk about today's. So I'm gonna talk about. My name is. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is Muhammad Danial Bin Azizul. I'm a Bachelor of Science in Aquaculture, second year student. So let's without wasting our time, we have seen our slide. So let's talk about corals. So my topic today is about save our corals. Can you see what's in the picture below? It's not sand or rocks, but as you see, it's a dead and white corals. It's because of bleaching. Sad, isn't it? Because every island that I've gone, that everyone thought it was a sand or rocks, but it wasn't. It was a dead coral laying around on the beach. But it's okay. So next slide, we're gonna talk about what is coral. Next slide. Okay, as you can see in the picture, corals are marine invertebrates within the class of Anthozoa and of the phylum Cnidaria. So corals are the major contributors to the physical structure of the coral reef that develop in the tropical and subtropical waters. They can be found in Tioman Island, Sipadan Island, Mersing Island, and also in Bindong Island in Terengganu. As you can see, the coral community structure along the coast of Malaysia coral reef. It covers over estimate of 3,600 kilometers per cube, but mostly are found in Sabah and Sarawak, and on the eastern coast of Malaysia, which is in Terengganu and Pahang. The coral diversity is the highest in eastern Malaysia, which home to 550 species. So as you can see, the beautiful pictures of the coral reef from the all the picture are from the Malaysian coral reef. So the Malaysian coral reef have a structure of fringing reef. Okay, let's move up. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, there are two types of corals, stony and soft corals. So from the left picture below, you can see goniopora, often called as flower pot coral. The next beside the goniopora is the brain coral, and the right side is the mace coral. So they are very beautiful corals that live in the sea. So next, like I've said before, stony coral from the order of Scleractenia. These are the you can see both of the coral. So let me talk about stony coral. Stony coral obtain their food from one cell organism called zooanthellae. So from your biology class in secondary school, you have learned about zooanthellae, about a single cell organism that use sunlight for photosynthesis and transfer its 90% of 95% of the food they produce to coral polyp. So zooanthellae receive protection from currents and herbivore, as well as nutrient from waste product produced by polyps. Where this kind of interaction, as we can say, is a mutualism or mutualistic association. So these coral are called hermotypic corals. Hermotypic corals are that secretes calcium carbonate, as you all know. Corals secrete calcium carbonate, skeleton in which it forms the coral reef. So the coral reef in Malaysia or any place is formed from this type of coral, stony coral. There are hermotypic coral because they are known as a reef building coral. As you can see in the right slide, we can see both coral from the family Acroporidae. This both of these coral are from the family of Acroporidae. They are commonly known as staghorn corals. Their staghorn coral are most famous in Malaysia, which are a dominant group of reef builders. So they come in many shapes and sizes and can be highly variable in color and form. So they are green, yellow. So this type of staghorn corals are fast growth rate of corals. So they can, I would say that, have a fast growth rate. They can build the reef more faster, but not in a month or two, but in years. So in our next slide, so now we're gonna talk about. Just now we talked about stony coral, a reef building coral that build our reef. So in Australia, have you heard about Great Barrier Reef? There are coral reef. So just now you stated about stony coral. Now let's talk about soft coral. There are two things only, stony and soft. So soft coral are from the order of Alunacea. So soft corals lacks calcium carbonate. So they are not hard like stony coral. They are not calcium carbonate skeleton. Hence, common they are named soft corals. So soft coral have no exoskeleton as such. However, their tissue are often reinforced by small supportive element known as sclerites, made of calcium carbonate. So in the if you can see in your up right side of the slide, we can see Cineraria, the upper bottom, the blue one. A coral named Cineraria, a genus of soft coral in the family Alcyonidae, are commonly known as leather coral. So as you can see, this coral are called leather corals. So the bottom of the picture, we can see Clavularia viridis, a species of colonial soft coral in the family Clavularidae. So, but some aquarists call it green star polyp. It's famous for its green star polyp, but the species name is Clavularia viridis. So this coral, the green one, is green star polyp or GSP, a soft coral that is considered as a starter for aquascaping coral for most aquarists. They are very beautiful. You can see it's like grass, green star. Okay, so now we are all of you have understand in coral there are two things, soft and hard. Hard is for reef building coral, and soft is for corals, common corals. So let's move on to our next slide. Okay, what are the threats to coral reef? There are pollution, fish bombing, tourism that impacts and appear to be the greatest threats facing the coral reef in Malaysia. So not only that, as you can see, at the bottom slide of the picture, there's a picture. So you can see down there, it's a type of starfish. It's a starfish that endanger the life of corals, and the name given for this type of predator is the crown of thorn. Crown of thorn starfish, or in short, we call it as COT, a coral eating fish. And COT, crown of thorns starfish. This is one of the many problem that kills the coral in this country. So let's the next slide. I'm just gonna brief you about five subtopic about what threaten our corals. So in Malaysia, the coral reef of Southeast Asia are the most threatened in the world, quoted by Berg in the year 2002. So the first reason, okay, let's talk about the first reason: sediment, nutrient, and chemical pollution. These are what I say is because certain development activity lead to increase in freshwater runoff, resulting in large amount of sediment being washed into the sea. So this sediment, nutrient, and chemical pollution has been washed into the sea. What happened is when the direct sedimentation into the reef increases, the turbidity of the water will also increases, and this can lead to the smothering of corals, while increase in nutrients in the water, as you know, can lead to eutrophication. Both before that, you know what is turbidity. Turbidity is when how much the light can pass through in the water through the bottom. That is turbidity. If high turbidity, less light can pass through into the water. So both turbidity and eutrophication will result in decreased amount of sunlight that reach the coral. Why? Because reef building corals or stony corals need a lot of sunlight for zooxanthellae that live with them to photosynthesize and provide them with nutrients. Thus, if corals are unable to get enough light, they stop growing and eventually die. So it is bad when there are high turbidity in the water. The corals, the coral that live in the reef, or the coral that are stony corals, they are very sensitive to light. I mean, they need a certain amount of light to live. Okay, number two is predator outbreak. Like I said before, in the slide in the past previous slide, pre- uh, predator outbreak such as the crown of thorn starfish, like I explained before, or in short COT, is the species of Acanthaster pelensi. They are predator coral. They secrete digestive juice out of their body and efficiently digest coral polyps. For example, in Sabah, the state have deployed many divers to combat against this aggressive coral predator since the COVID outbreak. So imagine six diver that has been funded by the state must have not must have eliminated 100 this COT starfish in a week, and still there are many more that are killed. So back then, the marine park will be in danger of losing its coral reef, and eventually its diving industry will collapse. So uh, it's not wrong to kill this predator because it's a very dangerous towards our coral. So if you see one of the Acanthaster plancy, be sure to kill it with the right proper equipment. Okay, the third reason is destructive fishing practice. As you can see, there are often accompanying overfishing and destructive fishing practice, such as persining, fine mesh, and all these have been made illegal in South and Southeast Asia. So destructive fishing practice will endanger the coral. The next one is the most, not the most, I mean the main problem in that threaten the coral reef is irresponsible tourism. Snorkeling, diving, and boating can cause direct physical damage to the reef when the industry itself managing it very poorly. So when the tourism industry manage so poor, so this will damage the coral. For example, tourists they are the industry allow the tourists to walk on the reef, causing physical damage to the reef structure and stirring up the sediment. Sometimes they even directly collect coral or any aquatic species of the reef and carry it home. Sometimes the species itself is the main chain in the ecosystem. So when you disrupt a connection between a species and another species, will break the chain. So there are no balance in the ecosystem. So the other example is boat carrying tourists. Uh, when in low area, it will damage the reef. Sometimes the boat drop anchors. So when they drop anchors, it will hurt the body of the coral reef, disturbing any species around them, and also causing marine pollution through excessive traffic of so much boats in the area. So lastly, let's talk about global warming and climate change. Effect of the increase in ocean temperature that lead to coral bleaching, because reef building corals can okay don't move the slide, sorry, because reef building coral species can live only within a small temperature range. So this coral can accept a tiny change in temperature, but not so much, because it can cause seriously detrimental effects. So coral are also affected with change in sea level and associated water depth, because that these changes will affect the amount of sunlight reaching through the coral reef. So hard horizontally to photosynthesize in coral reef. Like I said before, high turbidity will prevent more light to reach, or not more light, or the light itself reach through the bottom towards the coral reef. So next is increased carbon dioxide. Uh, Decreased carbon dioxide that dissolve carbon dioxide in the ocean can form a weak acid, or like we call carbonic acid, making the seawater more acidic and reducing calcium carbonate precipitation by coral polyps. And also it will reduce reef calcification. This in turn will slow down a reef ability to grow vertically to keep up with the sea level rise and affect its protective function. So it's very important to know that global warming and climate change can have a large effect towards our coral in terms of increase in ocean temperature, affected by the change of sea levels, and dissolved carbon dioxide in the water. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. All right, there are a new threat. Thus, the current trade has a large impact on the coral reef and is a new threat to them. The practice of keeping marine aquaria as a hobby has increased in the last decade. As a result, more than 800 species of reef fish, hundreds of coral fish, and other invertebrates are exported into the aquarium markets. The majority of the fish come from the reef in the Philippines and the Indonesia. The majority of the fish also, while most stony corals come from Indonesia. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so in the right side of the slide, you can know that majority of the fish come from the reef in Philippines and Indonesia, while most stony coral from Indonesia. Indonesia before this has been the large coral exporter, and in a big industry that export large amount of coral due to the coral triangle that have more reef in Southeast Asia. So the stony coral trade is dominated by exports from Southeast Asia and South Pacific. Indonesia itself approximately 900,000 stony coral each year. So there are here, as you can see, 1 year Indonesia has exported 900,000 stony corals. So as you know, stony coral are a part of uh, corals that build reef. 900,000 a year. So what happened in many years? 10 years, it can reach a million. So that's when the government of Indonesia has stopped exporting corals and limited it to CITES, and then stopping them for and reculture the corals back. to preserve and rebuild the coral reef in Indonesia. Malaysia aquarium industry has also been exploiting coral from around the countries, but throughout the government, the government of Malaysia has limited certain industry or certain species, so our coral reef uh, are not the are not affected so much. But is it a new threat? We don't know, because sometimes, like as you can see on the left side, imports of coral are difficult to monitor accurately. Why I tell you, uh, as quoted by in the year 2001, tracking trade using CITE trade database provide limited information because coral is reported to genus and volume is reported by item or weight. The CITES mechanism, however, may promote the development of strategy to protect corals. A little thing about CITES is short name for Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. It's a multilateral treaty to protect endangered species like plants and animals. So as you can see, it's very hard to monitor the exporting of coral when the volume is reported on item or weight. So sometimes they can't keep track on how many coral are, how large the coral are exported. So sometimes in Malaysia there are irresponsible shoppers or retail NGO shop that that uh, export coral from the wild and not culture it and then export it to the other countries with high amount of price. Okay, next. Okay, what is being done to conserve our coral reef? So given that 20% of the world coral reef have already been destroyed, much has to be done in the future to protect and conserve our coral reef. Next. So firstly, how to conserve our coral reef is by establishment of marine protected areas. In short, we call it MPA, Marine Protected Area. They are coastal and season that specially limited with different legislation and regulation with the purpose to manage, conserve, and preserve marine natural resources and biodiversity. So, MPA is very important to conserve areas from tourists becoming a tourist hotspot. So the second is through prevention of overharvesting through legislation. There are laws such as federal laws pertaining to coastal and marine resources, Sabah state legislation, and other state legislation that can help preserve the safety of the aquatic ecosystem. Uh, but this can't be done alone because awareness and educational program must be carried out continuously with the communities to increase their support and cooperation with the Department of Fishery or any department to curb any illegal activity that can threaten the reef and also the coral itself. So as you can understand, there are three things that are um, they are very important in protecting our coral reef. The first one is establishing a MPA. Second is through legislation, and the third one is awareness and educational purposes. So these are very important things that can help curb the problem in Malaysia. What is threatening our corals. So next slide. We are at the end of our slide. Next. Okay, we can save the coral by ourselves through coral propagation. What is coral propagation? It's a method used in coral farming. When it was first developed in the aquarium, far from the natural coral habitat. So tiny coral fragment were cultivated into large colony and then broke up once again in order to be distributed among other aquariums. So propagation is a process where you culture coral. So you breed coral. So we are going. I'm gonna talk about two things here: coral propagation on stony coral and coral propagation on soft coral. So next slide. Okay, thank you. So we are gonna propagate stony coral, the species Ecopora species. So on your right side, on your right side, you can see uh this a coral species named Ecopora species. This is one of the staghorn corals. It's a reef building corals. Okay, first let's see at the three boxes here. The first box is about preparation. So you're gonna have an aquarium tank with artificial salt water and a skimmer. A skimmer is like a marine filter. So next is prepare two basin that is filled with salt water. One basin will have three drop of Lugo solution into the first basin. So one basin have a three drop of Lugo solution. The function of Lugo solution is to heal the coral after being propagate. So one sharp scissors, a fret plug, uh, underwater coral glue or aquascaping glue, and lastly the material itself, the Aquapora species coral. So the next step is fragging. Fragging is the method to cut to frag to propagate the coral. So we're gonna take the coral. We're gonna use a scissor to cut slowly at the tip, at the branch tip of the coral, about 1 centimeter. Okay, so when you have the part that have been cutted and the parent, so you're gonna place it into a Lugo solution and wait for a minute. Wait within a minute. So after a minute, you take the cutted part of the coral, the branch tip, and you glue it on the base onto a fret plug, and then place then we call it as a fret coral. The fret coral is then put in the second basin to let it dry. So in the result, after the glue dried, take the fried coral and place it in an aquarium tank. Like I said before, you need to prepare just one aquarium tank for a culture, and there's under above the aquarium tank there's a LED light, not any LED light, like a specific LED light. If you can research it some more, that can help coral to grow. So coral mainly grow during where there is more light for zooxanthellae to photosynthesize to give nutrient for them. So always meant if you want to the coral to have a fast growth rate, so you have to maintain the water parameter and always daily cleaning of the skimmer and give coral food, so it will boost up the growth rate. Okay, next. So as you can see, this is the propagation of soft coral, the Sinularia species. So at the right side, you can see this is what we call as ladder corals, a Sinularia species. So like I said before, we prepare it with an aquarium tank that is filled with salt water and have a skimmer to filter the water. So two basin, one basin have 3 drop of Lugo solution for coral healing, and the second basin standard salt water, a sharp scissors, fret plug, a rubber band, and I mean the material itself, the Cinerea species or ladder corals. So to move on to the fragging part. The fragging part is where we cut cleanly up any part of the finger coral about 1 to 2 centimeters. I prefer to cut it in 3 centimeters. So dip both of them into the Lugo solution and wait for a minute. And after a minute, take a part of the cutted part of the finger coral, leather coral. So you tie okay, you tie the coral, you tie with a rubber band, not so tight to avoid it from splitting again because they are very soft corals. So just at a very good type. Okay, next is the result. So place the fried coral in aquarium tank and put it under LED light. And always, as usual, always maintain the water parameter and clean the skimmer. And also give coral food daily. So among of the two coral, the stony and the soft coral, the stony coral is, as you know, that soft coral can grow faster than stony coral. But stony coral, why we help to culture stony coral? Because stony coral are reef building coral. They help build the reef. Because Malaysia is famous with staghorn corals, and these corals can help build the reef. So, and it is one of the why is acroporous species that I have chosen, because acroporous species is one of the many stony coral that have a fast growth rate compared to other stony coral. So that they are both. I explained to you two propagation of stony coral and soft coral. So help yourself to learn about how to propagate coral. Okay, next to our last slide. So what are the benefit of coral propagation? Uh, it's simple and cost effective. A propagation technique that can be used to restore denied reef and preserve endangered species. Second one is research purposes. Coral propagation can provide experimental materials for marine research and can help researchers gain more information on coral reef restoration. So, and this and lastly is about new knowledge. What I'm giving here is to help educate the community the importance of coral propagation towards the reef, and to attract the community or anyone to learn more deeply on aquaculture propagation techniques. Coral propagation helps to culture more coral, build the coral reef, and when you're getting into the coral industry, you are going to aquarium trade. We try to take we try not to take as many part of the wild coral and propagate it ourselves. Propagate many time. Half of the corals, as usual, are going to the aquarium trade, and half of it are going back to the sea where they can be cultured back and build back our coral reef. So that's all about thank you. Slide. So thank you everyone. That's all about how to save our coral. I have because not many know about what is coral. Like I say before, there are stony and soft coral, and what threaten our beautiful coral. So none of us know what's under the sea. Sometimes, like I said before, you know that was sand, but it was that coral. So let's together learn about how to propagate coral very properly and know the benefit of having a coral reef. So that's all. Thank you. I give the floor to Mr. Daus.
Such a great and wonderful sharing by our panel, Mr. Daniel. Thank you, Mr. Daniel, for this sharing. So I hope everyone can get acquire some new knowledge and perspective on this interesting topic about coral. So therefore, I will end this episode and wishing you all a good day and good luck. Assalamualaikum.